my paternal grandmother, when she was dying, like literally just white and a bag of bones. And I was 5 at the time. She knew that it was the last time that she would see her grandchildren. And she just wanted to touch our hands. I was so scared. I didn't recognize my grandmother that I didn't leave the door frame. And my dad was trying to pull me over to her because he wants his mother to, have this experience for the last time. And she saw how terrified I was and that I was on the brink of tears. So she just said, just leave her. And I never got to touch my grandmother's hands for that last time. And that was something that I regretted a lot and something that I questioned. My name is Nguyen. I am a filmmaker born and raised in Toronto, based in Montreal now. I guess my most notable film to date is a short documentary called No Crying at the Dinner Table. It had a very generous festival run. My next short film is called Nanitic. It will be premiering at TIFF this September. And then currently I'm working on other projects like a short animation, a feature documentary, and currently in the very early stages of writing a feature fiction.
Welcome to The Vietnamese. I'm your host, Kenneth Nguyen. Being part of a culture of nearly 100 million Vietnamese people in the world today comes with a lot of pain, proud history, and privilege. Join me as I highlight and explore the Vietnamese experience from all over the world. Thank you for coming on to the Vietnamese podcast today. What does it mean to be Vietnamese to you nowadays?
That's a very difficult question. And I don't know necessarily how to answer this because I feel like there's a differentiation between, Vietnamese people who live in Vietnam versus Vietnamese of the diaspora. I think the sole connector of all Vietnamese people is this sense of collectivism and community. And in some ways, spirituality in whatever that means to you. I think that the Vietnamese culture is very spiritual and rooted in different I think like dimensions in according to death. Maybe it's because the last time I went to Vietnam, I was exploring this aspect of death and death rituals, and I found so many ghost stories and so many superstitions that somehow, whether you believed it or not, it like affected everyone's life. And I found that like I was raised around this aura of ghosts, of superstitions, of what have you as well. However, I think that being first and second generation Vietnamese is very different. Especially it also depends on like what country you live in. I think in North America it's very different than Vietnamese people in Europe and Vietnamese people abroad in other countries as well. So it's a hard question to answer. And I think it's an ever evolving question because what I thought it meant to be Vietnamese before I went to Vietnam changed significantly to after I visited the country. And, it keeps on changing as I have a different relationship with my parents, as I have a different relationship with the language, as I lose my language, as I relearn it again. So it's complicated, but it's not something I think about on a regular basis.
Yes, indeed, it's complicated, and yeah, we don't really think about it until you're sort of like it's ass, right? Like you're like, yeah, I'm a human being, I bleed blood, but there's other things that are pushing us to kind of think in certain constraints. Now, when do you think that you sort of recognize that? Did you at all recognize that? Growing up, there was this other country that was separated from where you were growing up.
Oh yeah, like my parents talked about Vietnam all the time, so I had always wanted to go to Vietnam, and they intentionally did not want to go back. Even when I feel like they were able to, like financially, they just never chose to go back for their own personal reasons. And so that had always bothered me because I'm like, I want to know my roots. I want to understand this country where all these stories are coming from. So I was very aware that, I had roots in another country that I don't necessarily know. And I feel like growing up not having visited your motherland, you start to create these stories of like what this country is, and you kind of construct with the stories that your parents give you this kind of rose tinted glasses look of that country, which is not necessarily tangible because it's not real, but it's like this myth that you build. So I lived with that myth for a very long time.
Yeah, and it shows up in your work, and that's why I asked that question, because I can see the questioning, the thoughts, kind of marinating in the way that your stories kind of unfold, to some extent. Now, why do you think? Actually, not why, but what do you think that your parents finally sort of felt when you decided to go to Vietnam and kind of work around this idea of Vietnamese culture?
Um, so the first time I went to Vietnam was not too long ago. It was in 2019, right before the pandemic.
And that was your
From
first.
October, first time. Yeah, I was 21. My short animation is about this experience actually, so I can kind of tease it as well. But it was for a study abroad exchange, so it was from October to January, literally right before they closed the borders to Vietnam. So I experienced the country in kind of this like illusion that I'm going for academic purposes, but really I just wanted to go for the sake of it. And when I saw that my school had an exchange with a school in Vietnam, I was just like, yep, no thought, I'm going to do it. But that decision led to the biggest fight that I've ever had with my mom. And I think she couldn't understand why I wanted to go back. And she had traumas herself that I feel like kept the country from her not understanding that the country has evolved since she was last in Vietnam. And concerns with safety, concerns with all these things that of course mothers should be concerned about, but at the end of the day I was just like, I have to go. And I took the decision to go, and it was one of the best experiences for me. It was also a huge identity crisis. I was very confused. I had a moment where I was in Hanoi and I was just like in the alleyway, and all of a sudden I stopped in the middle of the street and was like crying to myself.
Wow.
So it was a very interesting experience and a big growth journey, but it was something that I had to fight for, I felt. And I feel like after doing it that one time, my parents kind of understood better of like, my desires to explore and bringing back pictures and coming back alive and in one piece. They're like, we understand that the country has grown since then.
Your father and mother, like, I don't mean to pry, but like, what is their biggest beef with you going back to Vietnam? And well, other than the safety and all that, but what is their sort of like their main reason for not wanting to really associate with Vietnam right now?
I think a lot of emotional memories, maybe some that they haven't told me about.
Yeah.
And I think also political reasons. When I was in Vietnam the last time, which was a couple months ago, I got invited to my mom's university friends reunion. And she had friends who were grandpas now, friends who became teachers, friends who live in very lavish mansions and lavish lives. And a part of me was just like, I wonder what my mom's life would have been like if she had stayed in Vietnam. And then so I asked her, I was like, do you regret leaving, and do you regret not having this community and potentially have all these friends and remain have sort of some of your dream remain intact of like becoming a teacher, because she's not in Canada. And she said no, because she felt like as a person, there are things that the politics won't allow her to be 100% and express 100%. And that's what she said she valued more. But of course, there's it's very complex
Yeah.
because you don't know what it would have been like if she'd stayed. So I think at some point, when we make big transitions and decisions in our life, we stick with it, and we have to um, not convince ourselves, but we have to understand that the narrative that we're creating right now is the better narrative, because you don't want to think about the what ifs. And of course, if she didn't go, she wouldn't have had me, which obviously a blessing to this world. I'm just kidding.
Now I know where you get the fighting spirit from. Your answer about your mother really shows that it influences the way you think about the world, and how, you fight for the right to express, because that might not have happened had she grown up in Vietnam at that
Hmm.
time.
Yeah. So I don't know, but you can only imagine.
Yeah. Now, how did your family arrive in Canada, and what year? Why the decision to go to Canada?
So my parents went separately, and then they met in Canada. As like a preface, my dad tried escaping 3 times. So once in the late 70s, and then in the early 80s, and then early 80s again. He was jailed the first time because he was caught. And then the second time he was caught again, but then he ran away before the prisoners like took him in prison, something like that.
Yeah.
And then the third time he left, and he fled to Galang Island, which I think is an island in Cambodia. And so he was on that island for I think a year, and he wanted to go to the States, but there was such a huge lineup for the States
Mm.
that when a spot opened for Canada, he's like, next door neighbor, probably the same country. So then he took the chances and went to Canada. The same thing, I think, very similarly happened for my uncles on my maternal side. So my mom didn't flee by boat. She was sponsored over. My uncles were boat people, and then they, made enough money over the 2-3 years they were there to sponsor the rest of their family over. And my mom came in the mid 80s, I think, mid or late, yeah, something like that.
So they met in Canada.
Yeah, they met in Canada.
Got it. Got it. Now, when you were growing up in Canada, were there people that influenced you in the arts or storytelling in your family or church or temple?
Um, when I was young, I never really paid attention to that. But looking back, I feel like my parents are both such great storytellers. Like they're great oral storytellers, like
Mm.
the bedtime stories they would tell, just even talking about their past. Like there was always a lot of passion and emotion in what they chose to tell. And they didn't, especially my dad, they didn't tell many stories, but when they did, it was extremely intriguing. Um, but other than that, like my sister was very artistic. She's a painter. She's a ceramicist as well, and she was always dabbling in the arts. But for me, I just had like piano. I played trumpet at one point. I didn't even know what a director was. Like I I was watching like Shrek. I love like Ella Enchanted. She's the man. Very typical like teenage movies. So I didn't even know that filmmaking was a thing until I went to high school, and then there was a film program, and I'm like, whoa, what is this? And
Wow.
and then fell in love with it then. But like I remember like going into that program, and they're talking about all these classics like um Scorsese and these people. I'm like, who the hell is that? Who's this old white short man? Never heard of him. Shrek, I know Shrek though.
Did what year did you make No Crying at the dinner table?
That was so we filmed it in 2018, and it was released 2019. That was my thesis film in university.
Okay, I asked that question because I'm like, that argument that you have with your mother about going to Vietnam happened after you made that film.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking to myself, shouldn't she know better? Like after that whole your the strength to make a movie like that, and to put out a project that strong, versus the decision to go to Vietnam alone and to explore. I would think that like that argument happened before you made the movie, not after. And it blows my mind that, yeah.
Well, people think that people are like, oh, you're so brave, and your parents are so brave. But to my parents, it was just like, okay, you asked me this question, I'm just gonna answer it, right? It wasn't like a huge. To them, it didn't seem like an act of courage. To them, it was just they've been so involved with my film since I was 15 that it wasn't out of the ordinary for them to help me. And of course, this was like the biggest way that they've ever collaborated, and they were very open and willing to tell their story. But it didn't seem special to them what they were doing. Like my parents in the beginning, they didn't even understand why I wanted to hear their story, because they're just like, I don't know, I just never kissed my mom before. Like, what's special about that? Like, all of Vietnam has never kissed their mom, And like when I take No Crying back to my aunties, like it's the same thing. They're just like, why did this film win so many awards, right? So like, I think it was an act of courage on behalf of my whole family, and for us to take this commitment to do this project together. But like individually, they were just like, okay, you want me to talk about this? Like, I will. And it wasn't. I think because I had built a relationship with my family as a director and my family with the camera for so long since then, it was very natural for them.
Yeah, and the sort of, if my daughter made a film like that, I would be like, you want to go to Africa? You want to go wherever you want to go? Here's some money. Like I fully trust that you can handle your own, because the thought and the layers, and it's funny how disconnected the older generation is when they see a film like No Crying, right? It's like, yeah, that it doesn't really pertain to them as much as it does the kids, the second, third generation diaspora kids that, we go through these things that it's hard for them to kind of relate to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. And, there's a book written by Laksu. He's like my age, probably almost 50, called I Love Yous Are for White People.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. It was a pretty big book when it came out. It came out, I think, maybe 10 years ago. So it is a big phenomenon that, we don't engage in the same way we show love as, our Western counterparts, right?
Yeah. But actually, after No Crying, we started saying I love you to each other.
Oh.
So, not my dad, though. Still work in progress.
So interesting. Who started that? You or your mom?
I can't even remember. I think it started as a text, because it was a lot easier to send text. Because like me and my sister, and my mom, we have a group chat. My dad doesn't have an iPhone, so he misses the iMessages. But it started as text, and then slowly, I think it was like me and my sister that started it, and then my mom reciprocated it on the phone.
And now it's said out loud?
Yeah, yeah.
Is it still awkward?
No, not anymore. At first, it was just like, like, the words are like trying to, like, I've never said this before, and they're peeling off of my tongue very awkwardly. But it's natural now.
There's something to be said about the quiet love that Vietnamese parents have, right? That's like a new thing in my generation to accept and cherish and celebrate, is this sort of, okay, well, they don't do I love yous and I love yous are for white people, but we have this other, form of love. And both are valuable. Both are, special. Having it said out loud is a wonderful thing, but also the little things that they do is also a beautiful thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. This, I think my parents and a lot of people, Vietnamese people, had this thing of sniff kissing.
Oh, yeah. I never understood that.
It's kind of representative of the quiet love that Vietnamese people have. It's like we don't want to kiss out loud. We don't want to smack our babies with this, loud thing. It's just sort of this quiet sniff, and it's ingesting their essence, their smell into our bodies, right?
Mhm.
And it produces all of these wonderful chemicals, from parent to child and child to parent, and it's a wonderful it's unspoken and it's quiet, and I think it's very representative of the Vietnamese culture.
Yeah, I forgot about the sniff kisses. I think they fade out with age, right?
Yeah, they do. They do.
Yeah, because I don't think my parents do that anymore.
I think is a so I had two kids, and we were going through these baby on our first, my wife's and I first, our daughter, we were going through a class of breastfeeding from this local like YMCA or whatever, and they said that there's a chemical that's released for the parents and for the child when you are close to each other. There's a certain, God, I can't remember the scientific word for it, but it gives you this boost of happiness, and it's like kind of like how serotonin is for sleep and all of this stuff. It releases this chemical that makes you that gives you a certain boost emotionally. I suspect that at a certain age, that smell or that odor or whatever that pheromone gives off, of the baby gives off, is gone. I think that we don't need to go near it anymore, because once the baby hits 5 years old, 7 years old, it just kind of dissipates, and you don't get the same kick or high from sniffing your baby. That's just my guess as I'm going through my children, and I'm paying attention to when it wears out, because I'm very aware that it goes away. My mom doesn't sniff kiss me either. Yeah,
And your daughter is how old?
she's 5 and he's 3, and so I'm trying to find out like where the sniff kisses will start to drop off.
Mm.
Yeah, and I don't think it's a socially appropriate or inappropriate conversation. I think it's more of a biological conversation where that chemical just kind of fades out, and you just don't get the same high as they described in that breastfeeding class that these people. It's a certain word that it's I can't remember the name of the. I'm put on the spot right now. I can't remember what you get from smelling your baby scent, but it goes away. It definitely goes away at a certain point.
Yeah, I think I understand, but also not just between parents and child. I feel like just babies and children smell better in general. Like I don't, that sounds so creepy. It's like they just like
It doesn't sound creepy from you, okay? It sounds
okay,
creepy for me.
okay.
If I was to say that, it would sound really creepy. Not my kids, but I like to. From you, it sounds perfectly
I
appropriate.
don't sniff children though, but like it's it's I think it's just like a given that adults and people who have gone through puberty and have body odor, just they don't have that same, I don't know, whatever you call it is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's pheromones.
Yeah, pheromones, exactly.
Yeah, it's a very particular word. I keep confusing oxycontin, oxycodone. I don't know why. It's the opposite of that, or it's the opposite of cortisol, right?
Right,
Cortisol is
right.
like the stress of hormone. It's the opposite of that. So, but yeah, it's something that's released that we get this high from being around our babies.
Mm.
Yeah. When you were going to high school, what made you gravitate? What do you think made you gravitate to the film program in high school?
Um, Very simply, it was so the school was one of the best academic high schools at the time in Toronto, based off of some ranking system. And my sister went to it, so she really loved it. And I didn't know what to audition for. The only thing I knew, because you had to audition with an art skill. So the only thing I knew how to do at the time was play the trumpet. So I was going to do that. And then my sister's like, oh, I really love this teacher and he teaches film. Maybe you should audition for film as well, because you can audition for two things. So I was like, okay, why not? The film program was the only thing that you didn't need to have prior training for. So that was perfect because I couldn't dance, I couldn't act, I didn't know how to draw. So I don't remember which order I chose, but when I sat down for my band audition, and I'm so bad at doing things live, my lips were trembling that when I tried to play the trumpet, like nothing came out. So literally after 5 seconds, they're like, okay, let's just skip to the interview, you know? So I knew I didn't get into band immediately. So I did the film audition, and the film audition was like, I remember we were in a room and we were supposed to analyze a film. And I don't think I did very well, because later in my life, after I had graduated, my teacher told me that they almost didn't pick me for the program. So my life would have been very different if I didn't go to that school and enter that program. But because I was selected, I went through various teachers in the film program who were just super passionate about cinema, and not just cinema, but personal storytelling. So unlike many other film programs, even in university that you would think of, where you learn, you know, the skill and then you make a movie and the 3-act structure and very theoretical stuff, the program was more centered around like, what story do you want to tell? Why does it matter to you? And why should everyone else care? And as a teenager, you know, I feel like what they did really well was they didn't minimize your problems, whatever that was, and they made you feel like your story was important and it deserved to be told. One exercise that I remember that they made us do was to list in a grid 3 people who are the most important people in your life, 3 memories, 3 objects, and 3 like ideas or ideologies, and then choose like what out of all these things impact you the most in your life. And for me at the time, it was a memory of like a traumatic experience that I had a few years prior to that, and I couldn't like talk about it. I just pointed to it, and then he's like, okay, maybe that's something you should explore and make a film on. And so from that, it was like this huge healing journey of like dissecting why this memory was so important to me, how to tell a story from it, and why to even make a story out of this experience. And also, you know, what does this experience mean? Because I can't be the only one who has felt this, right? So it made me understand that my individual experience in the world can be universal if I'm able to understand it and perceive it in that way. And then that was like my foundation for cinema. And then, you know, it kind of built up on that. So I started not in a very theoretical space. It was a lot more personal and philosophical in a way. And it's all thanks to those film teachers.
Your life could have been very different had you been a better trumpet player.
Yeah. I wish. It's so embarrassing.
That's the comedy of life. If you know, it's like if you ponder on it, it's like how absurd it is that if you're trumpet or if you're a violin player and you're really good at it, but you go through high school at this place and, you know, they really foster that, but then you go out and you become an engineer. That whole filmmaking journey is completely like vanishes. Never happens. But this happened because, you know, you choked on the audition basically. And it steered your life into a totally different stratosphere.
Yeah. I mean, I could have easily been like an entrepreneur or a teacher or whatever. And I don't think I would have thought about being a director if it wasn't for that program.
Wow. And then you get to college and do you punch it up a few notches up with film?
Yes. Yeah. So then from there, I knew I wanted to be a filmmaker, and I just went to university and took a bachelor's in fine arts in the film production program. And there is where I really learned like the theoretical and the technical aspect of like, how do I even like work a camera? How do I work with the team? What is a first assistant director? Things like that. But like high school was very like working by yourself kind of a thing.
You know, making a movie at any scale is a very difficult and, you know, group collaborative process. And there's so many moving parts. And at so many given times, it's like it's exhausting managing all of it. And then finally getting something out that you can cut up and piece together to polish. You know, what gives you that drive and that energy to really follow through and make it complete and polished at the end of the day?
I mean, it's a tough question. And I think it's a question for all filmmakers
Yeah.
because the process can be very lonely at sometimes and very strenuous. Sometimes you're just waiting for something, waiting for finance, waiting for an answer for someone to collaborate with you. There's just a lot of waiting. So for me, I think I consider myself someone who enjoys making films more than watching films. And I think the process of it is really being able to give structure to an idea and give meaning to things that would not regularly be associated with meaning in real life. Like, you know, thinking about the art direction and how does that impact a feeling, thinking about the framing and how that gives meaning to your themes. And being able to universalize things. And I think like a big part of me, what I think my philosophy is that, you know, there's no, even if you have bad experiences, that doesn't mean that that it's not a beautiful story. Like you can make a beautiful story out of anything. And because of that, it's just the way that you frame your experiences, frame life, frame the way that you word things as well. And so I want to be able to make my experiences, make certain stories that I think are important, universal, and bring that to the screen. And of course, like I just enjoy the process a lot. I enjoy the people I work with. I enjoy that filmmaking is a project-based kind of job, and I'm not sitting at a desk 9 to 5. And I thrive off of things that have different steps and different requirements from you in terms of skills. So yeah, I don't know, I just love making film. Such a, I don't know, easy answer, or should be deeper, but yeah.
No, I mean, it's basic. And, you know, to do what you love is kind of a luxury in life. And to know it early on, you know, like a lot of people don't figure it out what they need to be doing or what drives them until very late in life. And there's a beauty to that too, because I'm experiencing that in my life, you know. So I used to really be jealous of people like you or my brother, you know, figured, you know, he's an animator and he got into drawing very early in his life and pursued it. And you know, hearing your story, I didn't get started till in my 40s. I kind of wandered and did so many things, but it all is brought together at the end. You know, it all accumulates into something. And you know, so if you're an early bloomer in your career or a late bloomer, I think it's all cosmically makes sense in the end to me. Yeah, the awards that are won when a filmmaker puts out something really good. I have been around this long enough to see how it changes your life in ways of access or funding and all of that. How do you think it's changed your predicament as a filmmaker?
My predicament as in like the way that
your access, your ability to make the next thing, and you know,
right.
Have you seen it really open up different type of doors that you weren't that you didn't think about before?
Yeah, totally. I mean, not just the awards, but I think No Crying had a very generous festival circuit. I think the biggest award that we won like many small awards, but the biggest one was the best documentary, short documentary jury award at South by Southwest. Um, and it was a strange year because it was the pandemic. So like when I had figured out that I won, it was just me alone in my apartment. And it was like just posted on an article versus like other years, it was a lot more celebratory. So I don't know how a non-pandemic festival run would have changed the outcome of my career versus now. So I think my situation is very like pandemic specific, but because it was the pandemic and the film was able to go online and like become more accessible to people who were at home, I think that it allowed a lot of eyes to be on us. We also did an Oscars campaign, which we had like a publicity team on, and we did a big push with like screenings, and we had filmmakers come up to do talkbacks with. Like I was talking with Bao, for instance. I was talking to Lulu Wang at one point, which was amazing. And that brought a lot of, I guess, eyes onto me and my film. And that obviously helps because people know who you are now and you have a shiny thing to put on your CV, you know, South by Southwest jury award winner, whatever. It opens a lot of doors. I think it makes you more known to people who are in the industry. I don't know if it's the film itself or the awards. I don't think like awards just open those doors right away, but I think it was the journey of the film, maybe the film itself, that also allowed a lot of producers to knock on my door and then help me develop my next films. So yeah, I was very lucky. Yeah.
Yeah, very fortunate indeed. As I follow your work, specifically I think that it's not enough to just be a good filmmaker. You know, a lot of people probably can make good films, but there's other, I think, that have led you to be where you are today. And I don't know what it is, but there's a magic to just not being a good filmmaker. There's more to it than that. Am I wrong in that assessment? Or do you think that you can add to the idea of it's just not making good films? It's more than that.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think you can say that about anything. I think the biggest thing, first and foremost, is don't be an asshole. Like there are so many people who are good at what they do, but you know, they're assholes and no one wants to work with them. Or
I wasn't expecting that, Carol.
or maybe people who don't thrive to grow or to be better. And I think that the reason that I enjoy what I do as well is because I surround myself and I have a great people who want to be there, who want to be better, who want to make it work and make that collaboration happen. I think that sometimes when you don't find the right people, it can be very difficult to enjoy the process and even be proud of what you've made, because a part of like filmmaking is so long, like the end product is the only thing you see, but it's like years in the making before that. So I think when you're genuinely kind, curious, when you enjoy working with the people that you're surrounded with, it helps everyone grow who is on that horizon with you. Obviously, like hard work is very necessary, and in a field where there's no path, unlike being a doctor or an engineer, I don't really know what like my next year looks like, right? I'm not employed by someone. I have to really work hard and hustle and look for the opportunities myself. And I think that active digging and not just sitting there for things to come to you, because things will come to you, but you just don't know when, and you have to plant those seeds for yourself so you can thank yourself in the future. That's a huge part of it as well. And I don't think I'm the most talented filmmaker. I don't think I'm the best storyteller. I think there are many people who are great storytellers, but perhaps they don't have the other aspects that they're able to set themselves up for certain opportunities in the future. Like some people, if they were paired with a manager, I think they would thrive really well. Yeah.
That's what I'm talking about. When I look at your work and I look at what you've done in such a short amount of time, that's what I'm saying. Exactly what I'm saying is.
Sorry, I have one more thing, because I don't think it's only the individual. Also, I think it depends on the environment that you live in and like the institutions that surround you. Like, for instance, I feel like if I had lived in the States, I don't know if I would have been the filmmaker I am today, because a lot of my films are supported by public funds. A lot of my films and my experiences have thrived because I've been a part of like fellowships, mentorships, and things that have provided me with the skills that I have today. Also, I guess like the independent film scene in Quebec has really helped me find my footing. I don't know how someone like me in my emerging stages of my career would do in a place like the States, where it's very competitive. There's no public funds. It's largely based on like investments and like who it's of course hard work, a little bit of luck, a little bit of charm, a little bit of everything. But also, I didn't choose to be born where I was born, right? So I'm very lucky with that as well.
You bring up terrific points that I didn't even think about, but I just know, like looking at the landscape, and I'm just like, there's nobody like you, because you're a young woman who has gone very far on the festival circuit, and the body of work is just it's quality driven, and they're really good. And there's this other layer of success. So you're right. Don't be an asshole is number one. And then being born wherever you were born into an environment that has this infrastructure to support the artistry that you've come into. It's a huge, because
it's huge. Right.
In the United States, we don't. You're going to go intern at some bullshit production company for years, move up as a development exec or whatever. There's, you're not at your age getting to get money, hands-on equipment, and go out and make a movie. And that's a really big tell.
And not only that, but like, for instance, I was a part of a workshop in Amsterdam this summer, a documentary workshop. And there was me, and then there was a girl who is Vietnamese, born and lives in Vietnam. And like our circumstances for how our production can thrive and how, like, what's possible even was totally different. What we can talk about, the budget that we had to do things, the skilled workers that we have around us, and also how much we had to bend ourselves to get our films made. And that was really astounding to me.
Night and day.
Mm-hmm. Totally.
Yeah. I really do appreciate that answer, because, sometimes we look at and we compare our lives to people around us and people in our same, we think, sphere, but the circumstances of the person or the artist developing are very different. And we sometimes don't think about it, the nuances of like what they're given and what kind of opportunity or lack of opportunity created their form of storytelling or music or art.
Yeah. And I have like a lot of young people ask me for advice all the time. Like sometimes we have like Zoom coffees and stuff like that. And they're like, how did you do this? And I'm like, well, I had project funds at my university, or I had provincial or governmental funds that I could apply to. Like I can give you advice, but like, it's not based on your circumstances, whereas you live in Seattle or something like that. And it's hard. Like, yeah.
Yeah. Truly blessed. What other art forms other than trumpet playing inspire you?
I'm a pole dancer. That's an art form.
Yes, definitely. What got you into that?
The first time I was in Vietnam, I saw my friend pole dance.
Wow, how
And
ironic. You got pole dancing from Vietnam.
exactly, yeah.
Mm.
And in Vietnam, everything is cheap. So I'm like, if I'm going to try something new anywhere, it's going to be Vietnam. And then I fell in love with it. It made me find my self confidence. And I always loved dance. So it was the perfect art form, I guess.
No, it for me when I look at it, it just seems so dangerous because of like if you slip, you could really hurt yourself. Like if you're upside down and the grips are like off of a slippery pole, and it just feels very dangerous to watch. Is it?
Yeah, you have like hand grip. It's kind of like, it's called dry hands. It's kind of like chalk when you rock climb. But I have fallen multiple times. And like once I fell on my back in fetal position.
Oh my God, yeah.
And then that gave me like chronic pain for like 3 years. I'm good now, but it can be dangerous if you don't have the proper training. But once you do, it's really like you just got to trust your body and understand that the grips that you do are like, they might be scary, but they're the grips for a reason. So yeah, it's amazing. You should try it.
Yeah, I look at I'm not really inclined for dangerous sports. And I look at pole dancing. I mean, even like if when I was coming up in my life, going to the strip clubs, I couldn't get my mind off of how dangerous that stuff looked. Like the act of it, no matter how sexualized it is, it was just so I couldn't extricate myself from the danger of the moves that I was witnessing. And so you're like, I should try it. I'm like, I enjoy snowboarding very much, and I still can't bring myself to. That's to me more safe than like
snowboarding is more dangerous to
Yeah,
me.
yeah. I'm sure. I'm just like playing
You're
around.
moving downhill at like 50 miles an hour. I don't know how fast, but that to me is like you can run into a tree. That's scary.
Yeah, yeah. Now, do you pick up pole dancing in Canada? Is it widely accessible for you?
Yeah, yeah. I have a studio and I go about like once a week. So
Oh, okay.
yeah, I practice regularly.
That's
Maybe
amazing.
one day I'll do competitions, but not yet. They're not good enough.
Is there any documentary on pole dancing and that whole niche?
I'm sure there is. And maybe someone's working on that right now because pole dancing as a sport and as an acrobatic um, thing has really risen the past few years from what I've seen. So I'm sure someone's going to do it. I would love to do one if someone wants me to direct it for there's a producer out there.
Just putting it out there. That would be a dope documentary because I think that there are revolutions in every sport that you see, every period. It could be, 2 years, 9 years, 10 years, that a sport will go through a revolution. Some young person will bring like a whole different vibe to the table and elevate the sport and bring it to another heights. And I wonder, how much development more is there in pole dancing, from where it is right now, right? Because some superstar is going to come onto the scene and then just blow it up to the next level.
Yeah, I mean, it's already happening. I think like the one thing that's made it big is kind of the shift in society where people aren't sexualizing pole dancing as they used to anymore. And then, you see things like FKA Twigs, she did her music video, and people see it more as an art form and an acrobatic experience than just something for the clubs. And of course, we have to, it's rooted from that. So it will always have that association. And there is pole dancing in heels. If you want to be sexy, you can make it sexy. But there's just this understanding that it doesn't have to be just one thing now.
Right.
And I think that's what has made it blown up.
And there's another side to that conversation about sexualizing things too, which I've recently learned in a very difficult way. But now I'm starting to see it and kind of get a grip on the landscape of this idea of sexual positivity, right? It's like you can even sexualize pole dancing. That's fine. And you just have to have a very positive, no judgment on the actual sexuality of pole dancing. And that's fine too, right?
Yeah. I mean, if I want to put that energy out there, that's fine too. Like sometimes it's what is the fun of it. It's to perform, it's to put on a character, it's to feel a certain energy that maybe you can't off the stage. And like you can say the same thing for men, right? Like if a man wants to feel and look like a snack, then so be it.
Yes. And I think what a wonderful world we live in today. You know, it's just the freedom and the positivity. And I'm a dinosaur when it comes to this sort of like this new understanding of the world. I'm beginning to see so many of my past comments were bad. They're just judgy, and and it's not just in the sexual realm, but it's just, all of the things that we don't examine, in this new time where it's like our legacy is really just the words we put out sometimes.
Yeah. I think some people from the older generation think that, especially for women, like if you're sexy, you can't be anything else.
Yeah.
Or if you categorize women in different ways. But if you're sexy, you can still be a nerd. You can still, be a pole dancing filmmaker. There's so many dimensions to just, anything, that you can't just stereotype women based on what you see and fit into the box of yours. Yeah.
Do you follow what Vietnamese filmmakers are doing throughout the world?
Yes, of course. I feel like we're so interconnected nowadays with social media that we're all kind of following each other.
This is always a tricky question because I don't want to exclude any Vietnamese filmmakers, but who are some of the people that you follow and you kind of study in the Vietnamese world?
Ooh, I don't really study anyone, but I follow very closely a lot of filmmakers. The first person that comes to mind, because I recently met him in person for the first time, is Andrew Trung and Jeannie Nguyen. So Andrew, have you heard of him?
No, I have not heard of either one of them. They're young filmmakers.
The young filmmakers. Jeannie is like working on a series right now, and she did a bunch of amazing short films called like Saigon and First Generation. And then Andrew is a cinematographer, and he shoots amazing stuff. And I think they were really one of the first two filmmakers that I discovered, and I was like, whoa, there's amazing Vietnamese filmmakers out there, and I'm really inspired, and they're telling great stories, and yeah, so I follow them very closely. Obviously, Bao is great. I met him for the first time as well a couple months ago. I think a lot of the Vietnamese filmmakers that I follow are from the States, because there's not many Vietnamese filmmakers in Canada or in Europe, from what I know.
Yeah.
And also recently I connected with the Vietnamese film industry in Vietnam, although it's very different because it's more of like commercial films and music videos than like independent films. And there are independent filmmakers. It's just like they're very sparse in Vietnam. And I think soon momentum is going to pick up and they're going to really grow and kick off. But with the circumstances right now, it's just a lot harder. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head with the soon it's going to be a totally different landscape with film production in Vietnam. People with your skill set will be in high demand in a few short years. I don't think we're very far behind Korea.
I'd hope so.
Yeah. And that being said, I mean, I say it hopefully, that's my hope for Vietnam. But, there's still a lot of issues like censorship and, skilled workers in the business. And, a lot of that obviously will need to kind of come up and improve. But at the same time, I think the will and the young force, young, energetic workforce in Vietnam, a lot of people are very hungry to make really good films.
Yeah.
What do you would you say to young kids that are starting out in film or art and pursuing it? What would you say to young kids that are getting their start today?
Just to do it without any fear or any hesitation. I think when you're young, you don't really have much to lose. Like you're just in that stage of exploring, trying to find your artistic uh, touch, and also, you're trying to discover who you like to work with, how you like to work, how things even function, even if that's like a camera. So be curious, and there's not a lot at stake. So allow yourself to fail, allow yourself to try different things and step outside of the box.
I want to sort of end on Nanitic and talk about your latest project and the journey, the inspiration, all of it, the making of it. If you can share the beginnings of that short film.
Sure. So there's a couple stories from my childhood that I've melded together for Nanitic. One of them was my paternal grandmother. When she was dying, she had cancer and she was in the hospital. She lost all her hair. She was like literally just white and a bag of bones. And I was 5 at the time. And the last time I visited her in the hospital, she knew that it was the last time that she would see her grandchildren. And she just wanted to touch our hands. So my sister went up to her bedside and she touched her hands. And then when it came to me, I was so scared. I didn't recognize my grandmother that I didn't leave the door frame. And my dad was trying to pull me over to her because he wants his mother to, have this experience for the last time. And she saw how terrified I was and that I was on the brink of tears. So she just said, just leave her. And I never got to touch my grandmother's hands for that last time. And that was something that I regretted a lot and something that I questioned, because when someone is dying, when someone is not that person you recognized before, especially as a kid, like, why does that fear affect you so vividly? What were the things that I didn't understand as a kid that brought me to that moment, and how would I have wanted that situation to turn out, for this not to have turned into a regret? And then another one is a story of my aunt. My aunt, she was one of the main caregivers for my grandmother. And when my grandmother died, I felt like her life had really shifted because she didn't have kids, she didn't have her family. So her life very much revolved around being a caregiver and keeping this woman alive. And so this huge shift in my family happened, and there's a bunch of things that I might not have time to explain, but when the pandemic hit, I noticed that everyone's life had changed around us. We weren't going to work anymore. We had, different routines, but her routine stayed very similar because she had continued to become sheltered, to be sheltered and to continue her mundane, I guess, routine. And so that made me think back as well to that time of when my grandmother was dying, and the thing that I didn't recognize when I was just a kid and playing around my dying grandmother, and still stealing the candy from her closet, and not thinking any deeper than my immediate satisfaction and my experiences at the time as a kid. So I wanted to combine these two memories amongst others to explore these periods in my life where I felt like that childhood naivety is something that clouds your judgment over the actual situation that's going on.
Now, where does the title come into play with the two stories?
Yes. So Nanitic is a second generation worker ant. So it's no, the first generation. So there's a queen ant, and it's the first brood of worker ants. Um, the worker ants are generally smaller than the next generation because they sacrifice a lot of their energy and their food to raise the next generation and to keep the queen ant alive and to take care of her. And when I read about the Nanitics, it really reminded me of my aunt's situation, and not just her, but a lot of situations with immigrant parents, and how, as children, we're not really aware of all the sacrifices that they do to keep the next generation and to give them the opportunities that they have. I think of my mom, for instance, who wasn't able to reobtain an education. I think of the sacrifices that my dad made working factory jobs, and it was thanks to the Nanitics that the next generation are a lot bigger and healthier and can have the colony thrive seamlessly. So that was one of the anecdotes that I wanted to play on, but then also this idea of the queen ant, and this idea that the colony is only a colony and survives when the queen ant is alive. And when the queen ant dies, the colony dies with it as well. So I thought of this moment when, all my grandparents died. So by the time I was, I think, 16, all of my grandparents from both of my families had passed away. And that shift when the grandparents die is a huge shift in the family dynamic.
Yeah.
Because, your family doesn't gather so often anymore. Your parents don't see their siblings, and you kind of like start to live your own life. And in a way, that colony in your family dies as well. And so goes the culture, because the grandparents were the one that held the key to what I think, like, the experience of what it felt like to be fully Vietnamese, to live through the war, to bring that over to Canada and, give that to their kids, and the stories that might die with them. And so I felt like the ant colony was a very interesting metaphor to play for this moment, not only culturally, but also identity-wise, in terms of playing on the grandmother as the queen ant and the auntie as the Nanitic, and Trang, the little girl, as potentially the second generation.
I'm mesmerized as you're telling me the details here, because I am thinking about my grandparents passing, and and how it's affected and shifted our family dynamics. We don't get together at all anymore, or maybe once every 2 years since she's passed. And I'm mesmerized because I think about really the big metaphorical application to Nanitics as it relates to a lot of different things in our culture. And, just to be able to weave all of that and the meaning and the depth, and to show it in the colors and the lighting. I have such an appreciation for the work that you do, and for Nanitics. I got, thank you for allowing me to take a peek at it. And I am excited to see the next decade or two of the work that you put out.
Thank you.
Yeah. It was wonderful to spend time with you today, and I hope that we can get back when you have your next project, or the next time you have anything coming out. Please don't hesitate to reach out.
Yeah, give me a year. Stay tuned.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Carol, and we'll be talking soon.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for listening to The Vietnamese with Kenneth Nguyen. The Vietnamese is produced by Brittany Tran. Special thanks to Jane Nguyen, Catherine Nguyen, Tina Pham, Sydney Jamie, and Christo Trin. Please find us on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok at The Vietnamese Podcast. You can also find us on YouTube, where you can subscribe, like, and comment. Please rate and give us a review wherever you find our podcasts. Thanks again for listening.